Picture a house with 40 rooms and 11 people who are allowed to sit down in them. Now fill it with silver that takes 4 hours a day to polish, coal fires in 22 grates that someone has to light before dawn, and a staircase you're forbidden to use because your feet are the wrong kind of feet. Add a dinner of 12 courses served to 8 people, a kitchen where a 14-year-old girl scrubs copper pots until her fingers split, and a master upstairs who has never once boiled his own water. That's Park Lane, London, 1888. The richest street in the richest city in the richest empire the world has ever seen. A place where a single dinner party costs more than the man carrying the soup will earn in 3 years. A place where you could touch a fortune every single day and never own a shilling of it. We're going back there tonight, not as guests coming up the front steps. We're going in through the area door, down the iron stairs at the side, into the basement where the real house lives. One night, one person, everything they would have seen, smelled, heard and survived. So I make these history stories, and honestly I still don't know if anyone actually sleeps to them or if you're all just lying in the dark thinking about Victorian footmen with aching arms. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Here we go. Your arms are on fire, and you cannot put the tray down. That's the whole rule of your life, condensed into one sentence. The silver tray weighs 11 pounds empty. Right now it holds a decanter of claret, 6 crystal glasses, and a dish of hothouse grapes that cost more than your mother spends on food in a month. And you've been standing against the dining room wall holding it at chest height for 40 minutes, and your shoulders have gone from aching to burning to something past burning. A deep, trembling numbness that you know from experience will turn into pain again around midnight, when you're finally allowed to lie down. You cannot shift your feet. You cannot clear your throat. You cannot look at anyone at the table. Your eyes are fixed on a point on the opposite wall, just above the gilt frame of a painting of somebody's horse, and you've been staring at that point for so long that it has started to swim. You are invisible. That is your job. That is the entire job. Your name is Thomas Kittle. You're 19 years old, second footman in the household of Mr. Aldous Renwick, who made £2 million in South African diamonds and Argentine railways, and who is at this moment 4 feet away from you, complaining that the pineapple ice is slightly too cold. Too cold. The ice. You keep your face perfectly still. That is also the job. You came to London 3 years ago from a village in Norfolk with 1 change of clothes and a character reference written by the vicar, and everyone at home said London would swallow you whole. They weren't wrong. They just didn't know it would swallow you into a house like this. A house where you eat better than the vicar himself, sleep under a roof that never leaks, and are worth, on the open market, almost nothing except your height. That's not a joke, by the way. You are hired for your height. 6 feet exactly in your stockings. Footmen are hired by the inch in this city. A 5'6" footman earns £20 a year. A 6-footer earns 30, sometimes 40. Nobody has ever explained why. Tall men look better in livery, that's all. You are, quite literally, decoration. Living furniture, with a pulse and a salary and calves. Your calves matter too. They must fill the white silk stockings properly. And there are footmen in this city. You know 2 of them personally, who wear padding. False calves strapped under the silk because their legs came up short and their wages depend on the shape of a limb. Mr. Renwick paid £32 a year for you, plus livery, plus board. He spent more than that on the flowers for tonight's table. You did the arithmetic once, in bed, in the dark, and then decided never to do it again. The dinner is in its 2nd hour. 8 guests, 12 courses, and every course has its own architecture of plates and glasses and implements, and every one of those objects passes through your hands or the hands of the first footman, William, who stands against the opposite wall like your mirror image, 6'1", powdered hair, the same burning shoulders, the same fixed stare. Because yes, your hair is powdered. It's 1888. There are electric lights in some of the theatres now. There are telephones in the city. And you are standing here with your scalp caked in flour and violet powder like a servant from 150 years ago, because Mr. Renwick's wife thinks powdered footmen look established. Old money powders its footmen. New money desperately wants to look like old money. So every evening you wet your hair with soap water, comb it stiff and dust it white. And every night it dries into a crust that cracks when you frown, and flakes onto your collar, and gives you a cold in the winter because you're essentially standing around with a wet head in a draughty hall. Footmen die of pneumonia at rates that would frighten you if anyone bothered to count. Nobody bothers to count. The smell of the dining room is money. You've learned to break it into layers the way a wine merchant breaks a claret. Beeswax from the floor, that's the base. The housemaids polish this floor on their knees every morning. Above that, hothouse flowers, stephanotis and gardenia, forced into bloom in glass houses in January by gardeners burning coal to make summer happen out of season. Above that, the food, turtle soup, roast saddle of mutton, pheasant that hung in the game larder until it was one day short of scandalous, and over everything, cigar smoke waiting in the wings. The gentlemen will light up when the ladies withdraw, and the ladies' scent and the hot metallic breath of 24 candles, because Mrs. Renwick refuses gas in the dining room. Gaslight makes the ladies look green, she says. Candlelight makes diamonds move. And there are diamonds at this table doing a great deal of moving. The woman on Mr. Renwick's right is wearing, around her neck, roughly £4,000. You know this because William told you, and William knows because the valet told him, and the valet knows because valets know everything. £4,000, 125 years of your wages, resting on a collarbone, catching the candlelight every time she laughs. She laughs a great deal. Mr. Renwick is not a funny man, but he is a rich one, and rich men's jokes improve enormously with income. Your right shoulder sends up a flare of pain, sharp, specific, like a hot needle under the blade. You breathe through your nose slowly. There is a trick to it. You put the pain somewhere else. You imagine setting it down on the sideboard next to the silver, and you tell it, later. Everything in your life happens later. You eat later, you sit later, you sleep later, you live later. The butler, Mr. Fall, moves along the table with the wine like a bishop with holy oil. He is 61 years old. He has been in service for 47 of those years, and his face has achieved a stillness that yours can only imitate. When he was your age, he served in the household of a duke. A real duke, he will tell you. On the rare evenings he tells anything. And coming to Park Lane, does diamond money to railway money, was in his private view a step down in dignity and a step up in wages, and at 61, wages won. His feet, you happen to know, are ruined. You've seen him in the servants' hall at midnight with his boots off, and his feet look like something that washed up on a beach. 47 years of standing on marble and stone. That's what 47 years of standing looks like. That's what you're looking at. When you look at Mr. Fall, that's the promotion. That could be you. Kittle. His voice is barely a voice, more a movement of air. pitch to reach you and no one else. The claret. You come off the wall. Your shoulders scream and you do not listen. You move around the table clockwise, always from the left for food, from the right for wine, always in the order of precedence, the lady of highest rank first, and God help the footman who gets the precedence wrong, because the guests will notice, and the guests will mention it, and Mrs. Renwick will hear, and it will come down through the house like weather, from Mrs. Renwick to Mr. Fall to you, and it will cost you. You pour. Your hand does not shake. 3 years of training in your wrist. The claret is a Chateau Lafite, 1864, and 1 bottle of it costs more than the kitchen maid earns in a year, and you will never in your life taste it, though you will smell it every night, and you have become, without ever drinking, something of an expert on the smell of wines you will never drink. The gentleman you're pouring for doesn't look at you. None of them look at you. In 3 hours of dinner, not one guest has met your eyes, and this is correct. This is the system working. A good servant is not seen. A good servant is a pair of white gloves that food arrives on. There is a phrase they use in the servants' hall, half bitter, half proud. The family should never have to know how anything happens. Fires happen, hot water happens, dinner happens. The house runs on 40 pairs of hands that are contractually invisible, and tonight, at this table, you are the most invisible thing in the room, and you are also, though nobody here would ever put it this way, the thing holding the whole performance up. Because that's what this is. You understood it in your first month. This dinner is not about food. Nobody here is hungry. This is theatre. The 12 courses, the powdered footman, the 4,000 pounds of diamonds, the flowers forced out of season. This is Mr. Renwick performing the sentence I have arrived, in the only language this city entirely respects. And you are part of the set. The pain in your shoulders has gone quiet again, the way it does. You return to your wall. You find your point above the horse painting. 2 more courses. Then the ladies withdraw, then the port, then the cigars, then the carriages, then the clearing, then the silver, then the shutters, then the lamps. Then you can sit down. Later. Everything later. Let me take you backwards now. Back to 5 o'clock this morning, because a dinner like tonight's doesn't begin at 8 in the evening. It begins in the dark, 17 hours earlier, in the basement. And if you want to understand how millionaires really lived in Victorian London, you have to understand this. A millionaire's day was manufactured hour by hour by other people, starting long before he opened his eyes. 5 o'clock. The house above you is silent and black. Below stairs, the first candle is already lit. It belongs to Ada, the scullery maid. She is 14 years old, she earns £8 a year, and she is the lowest human being in this house. Lower in the honest arithmetic of the household than Mr. Renwick's horses, who are groomed by 3 men and eat better than she does. Ada's alarm is the kitchen clock and her own terror of being late. She sleeps in a partitioned corner of the basement passage, on a bed that folds against the wall, and the first thing she does every morning of her life is rake out the great kitchen range. You've watched her do it. Everyone below stairs passes through the kitchen, and you've seen her kneeling at the black iron mouth of the range at 5 in the morning, sleeves pushed up, raking yesterday's clinker and ash into a bucket, and the ash rises around her in a grey cloud and settles in her hair and her eyelashes, and she coughs quietly, always quietly, because Cook sleeps nearby and Cook wakes angry. The clinker has sharp edges. Ada's hands at 14 are the hands of a 40-year-old bricklayer, cracked across the knuckles, burn-scarred on the forearms in pale sickle shapes. The skin around her nails split and resplit so many times it has given up healing smooth. In winter, the cracks open and bleed into the washing water. There is a word for that condition. The maids just call it chaps. And there is a jar of mutton fat and sulphur she rubs in at night, and it doesn't work, and she does it anyway because her mother told her to, and her mother's hands look the same. Ada lights the range with paper, kindling, and coal, coaxes it, feeds it, and by 5:30, the fire that will cook everything this house eats today is roaring, and Ada is already onto the copper pots, sand, soap, vinegar, and her own arm. A copper saucepan the size of her torso, scoured inside and out until it glows like a rose. There are 60 pieces of copper in this kitchen. She will scrub, over the course of today, most of them, some twice. And her reward for this labour is that not one person who eats tonight's dinner will ever learn her name. And I mean that exactly. Mrs. Renwick, who's employed her for 2 years, does not know her name. The family calls scullery maids, when they must be called anything, the girl. By 6, the housemaids are moving through the dark house above like a whispering army. 4 of them in print dresses that they'll change out of before noon, because a housemaid in her working clothes must never be seen by the family. If a housemaid hears the family approaching, the rule in this house, and it is a real rule written in the book Mrs. Renwick keeps, is that she is to step into the nearest doorway or turn her face to the wall and make herself, as far as possible, not exist until the footsteps pass. Turn her face to the wall. Think about that. There are women in this house who have worked here 6 years and whose faces the master of the house would not recognise in the street, because whenever he approaches, the faces turn away. The maids clean the reception rooms first in the dark by candlelight, because the family must never see cleaning happen. Grates raked, ashes carried, fires laid, 22 fireplaces, and everyone must be blacked, polished, laid and lit, and the carrying of coal is the great hidden labour of this whole glittering street. The coal cellar is under the pavement. A housemaid carries the scuttles up. A full scuttle weighs close to 30 pounds. The top bedrooms are 72 stairs above the cellar. On a cold day this house burns through several hundredweight of coal, and every pound of it goes up those stairs in a bucket in a 19-year-old girl's hand, and comes back down as ash in the same hand. And if you ever wonder why housemaids in photographs look older than their age, the answer is on the back stairs, going up. The back stairs. You should see them, because the whole social order of England is built into the architecture of this one house. The front staircase is marble, 6 feet wide, lit by a skylight, with a mahogany rail polished every morning by a maid who is forbidden to walk up it. The back stairs are stone, 2.5 feet wide, unlit, unheated, spiralling from the basement to the attics like a screw through the body of the house. And everything moves up and down them. Coal, water, food, chamber pots, laundry, you. 2 staircases, 1 house, 1 for people, 1 for hands. The house was designed this way, on purpose, by an architect, so that the family could live in 40 rooms and never once see the labour that made the rooms alive. The servants move through the walls. There are doors on the family floors covered in green baize, padded, silent, and on one side of the baize there is marble and gilt, and on the other side there is bare stone and a smell of tallow, and the door swings shut behind you with a soft thump like a held breath. And that thump is the sound of the entire 19th century. Hot water. Next. There is no bathroom on the bedroom floors. Mr. Renwick could buy plumbing, obviously. He could buy the waterworks. But the fashion among the truly grand is still the hip bath before the bedroom fire, and so hot water goes up by hand. Brass cans, 2 gallons each, 16 pounds full, wrapped in a towel to keep the heat, up 72 stairs, set down silently outside the bedroom doors at 7 sharp. Mrs. Rennick bathes in the evening as well. The water comes up. The water comes down. Your arms know the exact weight of a millionaire's cleanliness. And while all this is happening, the ash, the coal, the copper, the water, the man it is all for is asleep. Mr. Aldous Renwick sleeps until 9. When he wakes, he will wake in a warm room, because a maid crept in at 7 and lit his fire while kneeling on the carpet with her breath held. He will put on clothes that his valet has brushed, pressed, and laid out in the order of dressing. He will walk down to a breakfast that took 4 people 2 hours, and he will do all of this in the sincere, untroubled belief that his morning simply happens, the way sunrise happens. He is not cruel. That's the strange part, and I want you to sit with it. He is not a cruel man. He gives to hospitals. He pays on time. He is simply a man who has never in his adult life been cold in the morning, and does not know that he has never been cold, because the people whose job is to keep him warm are the same people whose job is to be invisible while doing it. You, meanwhile, have been up since 6. A footman's morning is the strangest mixture of splendour and drudgery in the house, because you belong to both worlds. From 6 to 8 you are a labourer. You clean the family's boots, 8 pairs this morning, blacking worked in with your fingers, buffed with a bone until your wrist aches. You trim and fill the lamps, and the paraffin gets into the cracks of your hands and stays there, so that under the white gloves all evening your hands smell faintly of lamp oil and blacking, a working man's hands smuggled into the dining room inside gentlemen's gloves. You carry up the coals for the ground floor. You polish, under Mr. Fall's eye, the silver. The silver deserves a moment, because the silver is a kind of madness. This house holds, in a locked room in the basement called the plate closet, something over £11,000 worth of silver. Dishes, covers, candelabra, a soup tureen you could bathe a child in. And it is cleaned with a paste of rouge powder and ammonia, rubbed on with the bare thumb, because the thumb, Mr. Fall says, is the only tool God made soft enough. Ours of thumb. Your right thumb has a permanent grey stain in the whirl of the print and a flat polished callus like a river stone. Every footman in London has that thumb. You could identify each other by it, like a secret society, the Brotherhood of the Silver Thumb standing behind chairs all over Mayfair with your stained hands hidden inside white cotton. And at 8 o'clock, the bell. The bells. I need you to understand the bells, because the bells are the nervous system of this entire civilization. In the basement passage there is a board on the wall with 38 bells on coiled springs, 1 wire running from each to a handle in each room of the house, and under each bell a painted label: drawing room, library, Mrs. Renwick's bedroom, dressing room, morning room. When a bell rings, it jerks and dances on its spring, and it keeps trembling after the sound stops, so that a servant running late into the passage can still see which room called by which bell is still shivering. Your whole day is shaped by that board. You eat facing it. There are servants in this city, thousands of them. This is not an exaggeration. This street alone employs more people below stairs than a Norfolk village holds, who flinch for the rest of their lives, long after they've left service, at the sound of any small bell. The body remembers. The body was trained to jump, and the training does not come out. Bell number 4, morning room. Breakfast is going up, and so at 9 o'clock you stand in the morning room in full livery, having been a boot boy at 6 and a coal heaver at 7 and a silver polisher at 8, transformed now into an ornament, and you lift the dome from a dish of devilled kidneys for a man who's been awake for 11 minutes. Now let me show you the money itself, because you handle it every day without touching it, and there is no better vantage point in the world. Mr. Renwick's fortune is about £2 million. I'm going to try to make that number real for you, because numbers this size stop meaning anything unless you nail them to the ground. Your wages are £32 a year. Ada's are 8. A skilled carpenter in this city, a man with a trade and tools and 20 years of experience, earns perhaps £90 a year and counts himself comfortable. Mr. Renwick's fortune, invested at a modest 4%, produces £80,000 a year, which means that while he sleeps, just the sleeping, the 9 hours, his money earns more than the carpenter earns in a year. He makes your annual salary roughly every 3.5 hours, awake or asleep, drunk or sober, and he made it last night while he was complaining about the pineapple ice, and he is making it right now. Where did it come from? Not from land. That's the old kind, the dukes and their 60,000 acres, and that kind is actually dying, though it doesn't know it yet, bleeding out slowly as American wheat undercuts English rents. Mr. Renwick's money is the new kind. Some of it came out of a hole in the ground at Kimberley in South Africa, where men, black men mostly, migrant workers housed in closed compounds, searched naked at the gates for hidden stones, dug blue earth out of the largest hand-dug pit on the planet, so that the woman at last night's dinner could wear £4,000 around her neck. Some of it came from Argentine railway bonds, which is to say from wheat and beef moving across a pampas he has never seen, on rails he has never touched, laid by labourers whose languages he could not name. The money is real. The work behind it is real. It is simply happening very far away, done by hands even more invisible than yours, and it flows into an office in the City of London, and condenses, and becomes this house. That is what a Victorian millionaire is at bottom. A point on the map where the labour of thousands of unseen people condenses into candlelight. And what does the money do all day? This is the part nobody tells you. It performs. The London season, May, June, July, is the performance schedule. During the season, this house runs like a theatre with 3 shows a day. Morning calls, ladies in carriages delivering rectangles of engraved card to each other's front doors, according to rules so intricate that getting a corner of the card turned down wrong can carry meaning. You take the cards at the door on a silver salver. Never in your fingers, the salver exists so that a lady's card need not touch a servant's skin. And whether Mrs. Renwick is at home to the caller has nothing to do with whether she is in the house. At home is a social verdict, and you are its instrument, and you have stood on that doorstep and lied with a perfectly still face to a countess, because that was the instruction, and the countess knew you were lying, and you knew she knew, and the entire system depends on nobody saying so. Then, the park. Every afternoon in the season, the wealth of England gets dressed and drives in a slow circle. Rotten Row, the south side of Hyde Park, 5 minutes' walk from your area door, hundreds of carriages at walking pace, ladies in landaus with the tops folded down, gentlemen riding, everyone watching everyone, a mile-long procession whose entire purpose is to be seen. You've been in it. You've stood on the back of the Renwick barouche in your dress livery with your arms folded, swaying. watching the backs of Mr. and Mrs. Rennick's heads as they nodded to acquaintances, and behind your fixed face you have done the servant's eternal secret arithmetic. The 2 matched bay horses pulling this carriage cost 300 guineas. The coachman on the box earns £60 a year and is the highest paid servant in the stable. The carriage itself, built in Long Acre, cost more than a terraced house in Hackney. And the whole apparatus, horses, coachman, carriage, you, exists so that 2 people can travel at 4 miles an hour in a circle and be looked at. It is the most expensive way of standing still ever devised. Then dinner, or a ball, or the opera, and the next day it begins again, and this goes on for 3 months. And here is the thing that took you a year in this house to understand. It is work. For them. I'm not asking you to pity them. Save your pity, you'll need it for Ada. But understand it, because it's the engine of everything. Mrs. Renwick works at the season the way a barrister works at law. Her capital is invitations. Her ledger is the visiting book. A duchess accepting her dinner invitation is a dividend. A countess declining is a loss. And the reason she needs these dividends is that the Renwicks are new. Diamond money, railway money. It's only money. The doors it opens in London are the outer doors. The inner doors, the old families, the ones whose names are on counties, open slowly, grudgingly, and only to sustained, expensive, flawless performance. And one powdered footman getting the precedence wrong at dinner is a scratch on the performance. And that is why the precedence matters, and that is why your shoulders burn. Because a man who owns £2 million is, in the only marketplace he cannot buy outright, insecure. You're a poor man employed to make a rich man look older than his money. Some houses on this street have stopped bothering. You hear about them in the servants' hall, which knows everything. Servants' halls are the best intelligence network in Europe. Footmen talk to footmen, valets to valets, and there is nothing a great house can hide from the street's basements. 2 doors down lives an American railway widow who is said to give her cook $500 a year, and to have hired, for one ball, an entire orchestra from Vienna. The old families sneer at her and go to her parties and eat her food, and this is the other thing you've learned. The sneering and the eating are not in contradiction. That is exactly how new money becomes old money. It takes about 2 generations and an ocean of dinners. The grandson of the sneered at will do the sneering. But I want to take you somewhere else now, because the strangest thing about being a servant in a millionaire's house is not the work and not the wealth. It's the intimacy. You know these people. That's what nobody outside understands. You know Mr. Renwick the way a nurse knows a patient. You know that his boots are built up a 1/4 inch on the left heel. You know from his valet. The valet knows everything and tells William, and William tells you, that he wakes at 4 some nights and sits by the window in his dressing gown, and that on those nights there are letters from the city on his desk with the seals broken and the pages creased from folding and refolding. You know that Mrs. Renwick keeps her first wedding ring from a first marriage nobody mentions in the false bottom of her glove box, because the lady's maid found it, and a lady's maid cannot keep anything to herself except her own history. You know their bodies, their debts, their quarrels. The walls are thick, but the doors have keyholes, and dinner is served by people with ears. You know the son, Mr. Gerald, 22, who came back from Cambridge with debts his father doesn't know about, and who last month, at 2 a.m, drunk in the hall, gripped your arm to keep from falling and called you old fellow, and wept briefly onto your livery about a horse that had lost. and the next morning walked past you as if you were a hat stand, which you were, which you are, which is correct. They know nothing about you. Mr. Rennick has employed you for 3 years and knows your surname because he must, although in some houses, and you thank your luck this isn't one of them, footmen are simply renamed James. Every first footman is called James in some households, whatever his mother called him, because it's easier for the family than learning a new name when the old James leaves. Men go through their working lives answering to a name that isn't theirs. Your name is Thomas Kittle. Nobody upstairs has ever asked where Norfolk is in you, whether your father lives, what you want. Why would they? Does a man ask his chair? And yet, and here is the part you don't say even in the servants' hall, the part you only think at night. You have grown fond of them, not of the system. The system can rot, but of the people, in the way a keeper grows fond of animals, helplessly, observationally against your own interest. When Mr. Rennick's letters from the city crease his face, something in your chest tightens on his behalf, and you despise the tightening, and it tightens anyway. You have crossed some line that servants cross and never fully come back over. Their house has become, in the treacherous grammar of the trade, we. We dine at 8. We're going down to Scotland in August. We. £32 a year, and the pronoun is the only share you hold. Before that, though, back in the first spring, before the ball, because I skipped something you lived and I want you to live it now, there was the morning you were lent out, and it showed you the one rung of this world higher than your own. It happens because footmen are lent like books. A house giving a great luncheon and short a matched pair of tall men will borrow from a friendly household, and in April Mrs. Renwick lends you and William for a day to the Dowager Countess of Strathearn, Grosvenor Square. Old money, real money, money so old it has stopped being money and become simply weather. And one day inside that house teaches you more about rank than 3 years on Park Lane. The first lesson is the shabbiness. You expect Grosvenor Square to outglitter Park Lane, and it does the opposite. The carpets are worn to the cords in the doorways. The silk on the chairs has faded to the colour of tea. There are water stains on a dining room ceiling that nobody has painted in 30 years. And none of it, this is the lesson, none of it matters at all, because everything in the house is 200 years old and came from somewhere, and the shabbiness itself is a boast. We have nothing to prove, says the worn carpet. We were here before proving was invented. Mr. Renwick's house gleams because it must. This house has permission to fade. You will never look at new gilding the same way again. The second lesson is the servants. The Strathearn butler is younger than Mr. Fall and grander than the Archbishop of Canterbury. And below stairs the hall is run with a frost that makes your own house feel like the Scotch barn dance. Hired and borrowed men eat standing at a side table after, and the third lesson comes at the luncheon itself, where you stand behind the dowager's own chair and watch 11 of the oldest names in England eat plain roast mutton off shipped Sèvres. Mutton, 1 remove, no pineapple ice, no swans, and discuss without one glance at the 6 tall men against the walls which of the new fortunes currently buying its way up the Park Lane end of things might be, as the dowager puts it, holding her glass out an inch to be filled. Your wrist doing its work under her rings, received eventually, and which never. And ye hear, standing 18 inches behind a powdered head, the name Renwick Wade aloud, the diamond people Wade, turned over and provisionally, narrowly with conditions passed, and you carry that verdict home in your chest like contraband and give it to no one. Not William, not Fall, not the railings. Some things a wall hears and keeps. It is the only power a wall has, and you have learned to enjoy it. And there was the other Lent-out day, the dark twin of Grosvenor Square. The day in May you were sent with the carriage to wait outside the church for the Fenwick funeral. A Park Lane neighbour, a copper magnate, dead at 51 of what the papers called overwork and the servants' halls, always more precise, called fright, ruined in a fortnight by a partner's speculations, dead in a month. And you stood holding the horses' heads in the black-plumed line of carriages, 40 carriages, the whole street's wealth sent to mourn. And half the carriages you could see down the line were empty, sent empty. That is a custom of this world, and I need you to sit with it. A great family too busy to attend sends the carriage alone, the crest, the horses, the coachman, the emptiness to represent them, and the emptiness is counted and appreciated. 40 carriages for a ruined man, and perhaps 18 actual mourners, and the widow on the church steps in crape that cost £40, bowing to a procession of beautiful vacant boxes. You held the horses and watched the richest street in the world pay its respects in the currency it trusted most, appearances, and understood the sermon better than anything said inside. This street will forgive you anything except failing publicly. Die rich and absent, and 40 carriages come. Die poor, and they send the carriages anyway once for the look of the thing, and then never speak your name again. You drove home behind 2 empty broughams. Nothing happens, whatever happens. Even death gets the treatment. The servants' hall, then. 12:30, servants' dinner, the one fixed point of your day, and the strictest room in the house. Stricter than the dining room upstairs, because upstairs the hierarchy is worn lightly, like scent, and down here it is worn like harness. The hall is in the basement at the front under the pavement. There's a long deal table, scrubbed white, benches down the sides, 2 Windsor chairs at the head, and above the door, framed, a printed card of household rules that ends with the sentence, "No follower is to be admitted on any pretence whatsoever." Followers meaning sweethearts, meaning that the maid's courting, if it happens at all, happens in stolen minutes, at the area railings, in the dark, with the kitchen door cracked for warning. 14 people eat at this table, and every one of them sits in a fixed place, and the places are rank made visible. Mr. Fall at the head, the housekeeper Mrs. Prow at his right, then the lady's maid, then the valet, then the cook, then William, then you, and so on down through the housemaids in descending order to the very foot of the table, below the salt in the literal old sense, where Ada sits, closest to the door, because she will be up and down serving the others throughout the meal. The scullery maid serves the servants. There is a floor below the floor below. The food is good. That's the thing that would surprise your mother. Beef most days, bread without limit, beer in pewter cans, and on Sundays a pudding with raisins in it. A footman in a house like this eats better than 9/10 of England, and every servant at this table knows it, and that knowledge is the mortar of the whole system. Nobody here is starving toward the revolution. The cage is comfortable. That is what makes it such an excellent cage. The upper servants, Mr. Fall, Mrs. Prow, the valet, the lady's maid, eat their pudding elsewhere, in Mrs. Prow's parlour, a ritual called going up that is performed daily with total seriousness. At the pudding course they rise, and the whole table stands while they file out. and only when the door shuts does the room exhale, elbows land on the table, and the talk begins. This is the freest quarter-hour of your day. William does his imitation of the wine merchant's man. The third housemaid, Effie, reads out a murder from the Illustrated Police News, which is banned in the house, which is why everyone has read it. And down at the foot of the table, Ada eats fast with her forearm curled around her plate, the way children eat in large hungry families, a habit her body will keep long after the hunger is history. Above your heads, through the pavement grating, you can hear Park Lane, hooves, harness, the pneumatic hiss of a swell's carriage tyres, the crossing sweeper's broom. The richest street in the world is your ceiling. You eat your beef directly underneath it, in a room whose window looks at a whitewashed wall 4 feet away, in air that smells of gravy, damp stone and beer, and you can hear the money walking around overhead like weather. At 1 o'clock the bells start again and the table empties in 90 seconds. The afternoon is errands, and errands are your liberty. A footman on an errand is the envy of the basement, because a footman on an errand is outdoors. Today, Fortnum and Mason for preserved ginger, the wine merchant in St. James's with a note from Mr. Fall, and a parcel of books to Hatchard's. 3 miles of London on foot in livery, and you take the long way because you always take the long way, and nobody has ever caught you at it. And here is what you see walking, that no guest at last night's table will ever see, because they see this city at 4 miles an hour from a carriage, and you see it at eye level. You see that the glory of Mayfair is 1 street thick. Behind Park Lane's marble faces run the mews, cobbled service lanes where the same houses show their other side, stable muck steaming on the sets, grooms in shirt sleeves whistling, a boy scrubbing a carriage's underbody with his arms black to the elbow, the sweet rot of horse and straw that is the true smell of this whole district once you step 10 feet off the front. Every palace has its mews, every silk front has a canvas back. London is a stage set, and you live in the wings, and once you've lived in the wings you can never again quite believe in any performance anywhere for the rest of your life. You look at a duchess and see the hairdresser's 2 hours. You look at glittering window and see the housemaid's ladder. It is a kind of second sight, and like most second sight, it is lonely. You see the others too, the army you belong to. London in 1888 employs more domestic servants than any other trade employs anybody. 1 working person in 6. Something like 250,000 women in this city alone. Carrying, scrubbing, blacking, waiting. On your 3-mile walk you pass dozens of your own kind, and you know them all at a glance. The cook's plain bonnet, the nursemaid with her perambulator and her charges, the between maid running with a jug, the page boy in buttons, and the footman, your brothers, recognisable at 100 yards by the walk that livery teaches, shoulders back, chin level, the gait of a man who is always, even alone, slightly on duty. You nod to each other, small nods, the Freemasonry of the silver thumb, and you see the border. This is the thing that still catches in your throat 3 years in. Walk east from Hyde Park corner, and the city descends through its layers like strata in a cut cliff. Mayfair's marble, then Soho's crowded, respectable poor. Then, if you keep going, only a mile or 2 more, the places the newspapers this very year cannot stop writing about. The courts and rookeries where a family lives in 1 room, where the year's great charitable survey is finding that 1/3 of London lives in poverty, where children go barefoot in January not from neglect, but because boots cost, And where this autumn in Whitechapel, something is happening in the dark that has put a word on every front page and a lock on every door. The distance from Mr. Rennick's dining table to that world is less than an hour's walk. You have measured it with your own feet. 60 minutes, door to door, from 12 courses to no supper. Nobody at last night's table has ever walked it. They have read about it. Reading about it is, this season, quite fashionable. You deliver your parcels. At the wine merchant's the clerk keeps you waiting, then hands you the receipt with 2 fingers not looking up. Even clerks rank above footmen. A man in trade, however small, works for wages but not in livery, and the livery is the mark. You've heard what they call your kind in the penny papers, flunky. A man dressed as a peacock to open doors. There are music hall songs about you. What the songs leave out is the arithmetic, that you send £12 a year home to Norfolk, that your money is the difference between your mother keeping a cottage and not, that your younger brother is apprenticed on your wages, that flunkydom for a village boy without a trade pays double what honest mud pays, and honour is a luxury item like pineapple ice. Back by 4, because at 4 the house begins its long climb toward dinner, and today, you should know, is not an ordinary day. Tonight is not 8 guests. Tonight is the 14th of June, the height of the season, and the Renwicks are giving their ball. 400 invitations, 360 acceptances. A marquis is coming, 2 earls, a cabinet minister, and, this is the coup, this is what the whole year has been for. A royal highness has half promised to look in after 11. The house has been preparing for 8 days. The florist's men came this morning with a wagon load of smilax and stephanotis and 10,000 roses. That number is real. You helped carry them. Your hands still smell of it under the lamp oil. A cold green sweetness that will hang in this house for a week. The ballroom floor has been chalked. An awning and the red carpet run from the front door to the curb. 20 extra staff are hired for the night. Waiters from Gunter's, the confectioners in Berkeley Square who've catered every great ball in this city for 100 years, and hired footmen in hired livery. And Mr. Fall inspected the hired men at 5 o'clock like a colonel inspecting recruits, and sent one home for dirty nails. Supper for 360. Consommé and quails and salmon in aspic, pyramids of strawberries, ices in the shape of swans, champagne in quantities you counted coming up from the cellar. 30 dozen bottles, and you carried them, and your forearms hold the memory. That particular deep muscle ache of repeated careful weight. Because champagne must not be shaken, so you carry it the way you'd carry a sleeping child. Tension without motion, and that is the most tiring carrying there is. The cost of tonight, by the servants' hall's collective reckoning, which is never wrong by much, not far off £1,000. One night, 30 years of your wages, 125 years of Ada's, to be spent between 10 in the evening and 4 in the morning, on the chance that a royal highness stays 40 minutes and remembers the name Renwick attached to a feeling of pleasure. And the horses. 10 minutes for the mews before the ball, because no account of how millionaires lived is honest without the animals that moved them. And the second household, the third, really, that lived over the stables. Rennick's stable stands behind the house across the mews lane. 6 horses, 2 carriages and a brougham, a coachman, 2 grooms, and a stable boy of 12 who sleeps in the loft above the horses, and swears the warmth coming up through the boards is better than any fire he ever sat at, which, given where he came from, is likely true. The horses live better than most of London. That is not a figure of speech. Walk the mews and do the sums. The carriage bays eat crushed oats, best hay, boiled linseed in winter for the shine of their coats. They are groomed 2 hours a day, strapped and brushed until their quarters gleam like the dining table. They have a farrier on call, straw to their hocks, rugs monogrammed with the Rennick cipher, and when one of them coughs, a veterinary surgeon attends within the hour, and you have stood in that stable during such a visit, sent across with hot mash, and thought, with a coldness that surprised you, of Effie's chest cold last January, doctored with flannel and goose grease and worked through 13 hours a day, because a housemaid sending for a doctor sends at her own expense. A carriage horse on this street is capital, and capital is nursed. A housemaid is wages, and wages can be replaced by Saturday. Nobody designed that arithmetic to be cruel. It is simply what everything here runs on, and the stable smells of it. That deep, sweet smell of oats and ammonia, and warm hide and saddle soap. The smell, if you want to bottle it, of a well-kept investment. The coachman, Mr. Prescott, is the aristocrat of the yard, £60 a year, a cottage's worth of livery, and a face like a bishop's under his cockaded hat. He has driven gentlemen for 40 years, and holds views on every family on the street measured entirely by their horseflesh, by which standard he'll tell you over the half-door on a slow afternoon, half the fortunes in Mayfair are shams. Carriage company, he calls them, the ones who job their horses by the month from a livery contractor rather than owning, and he can spot a jobbed horse at 200 yards, and so, he says, can everyone who matters, and there it is again. The whole street in one sentence. Even the horses are a performance, and even the performance has connoisseurs, and somewhere in London there is a man who can read your bank balance in your bay gelding's hocks. At 9 o'clock, you dress. Full state livery tonight. The good coat with the silver braid, the white silk stockings, the buckled shoes that pinch at the 4th hour, the powder fresh and thick. You and William stand in the basement passage under the bell-board, checking each other like soldiers, a tug at a collar, a flick at a shoulder, and Mr. Fall comes down the passage slow and immaculate, and looks at you both for a long moment, and says, the thing he says before every great night, the thing the old Duke's butler said to him in 1846, remember, whatever happens tonight, nothing happens. Meaning, a dropped glass has not been dropped. A drunk guest is not drunk. A crisis does not exist while a guest can see it. The performance is total or it is nothing. You go up the stone stairs, the bay's door swings, marble, roses, candlelight. Doors open at 10. And since we are walking the house tonight, let me take you down one last passage you haven't seen. The one behind the kitchen, past the plate closet, to the rooms where the house's body is kept alive. Because a millionaire's comfort had machinery, and the machinery had rooms, and the rooms had people. The lamp room first, your own kingdom, 6 feet by 8, shelves to the ceiling, and on the shelves the house's entire private sun. 41 lamps, brass and bronze, and one absurd ormolu monster from the drawing-room that takes 2 hands to lift. Every lamp trimmed daily, the charred crescent scissored off each wick in one clean bite, because a badly trimmed wick smokes, and a smoking lamp in the drawing-room is a felony. Every reservoir filled through a tin funnel, every chimney breathed on, and polished with a soft rag until your face bends in it. An hour and a half, every day of the world, in a room that smells so densely of paraffin that the smell has soaked into the shelf wood, the door, the mortar. You. Electricity exists. You've seen it, blazing white and steady in the Savoy down on the Strand, and some of the newest houses are wiring themselves already, and Mr. Fall regards the whole subject the way he'd regard a talking dog. 10 years, maybe 15, and this room and your hour and a half will simply stop existing, and no one will mourn it except, obscurely, someday, you. Next door, the brushing room, where the clothes come to be serviced like carriages. The valet at the long deal counter with Mr. Rennick's frock coat spread out under the window light, working the London grime out of the wool with a stiff brush, always with the nap never against, and the smoke smell out of the evening clothes with dabbed vinegar water and mud off trouser hems that were only outdoors for the length of a pavement. A rich man's clothes in this city are cleaned more often than a poor man's children. That's not rhetoric. You've done the counting. It's Tuesday's arithmetic in this room, and at the passage's end, the safe room within the plate closet, and once a quarter you assist at the ritual inside it. The plate inventory, Mr. Fall with the book, you with the baize-lined trays, every fork told like a rosary. But once a year, in May, before the season's first great dinner, comes the deeper ritual. The jewels come home. They live at the bank most of the year in Coates's strong room, and they travel back to Park Lane in a locked dispatch box on the seat of the carriage with the coachman armed, actually armed. A dog pistol in the box under his rug, and Mrs. Rennick and her maid spend an afternoon at the dressing table, lifting the sets out one by one into the light. The diamonds, the emerald parure, the pearls with the ruby clasp, checking the settings, holding them up, and the maid tells the hall about it after, every year, the same wondering report. That Mrs. Renwick handles 4,000 pounds of stones the way cook handles eggs, brisk, unmoved, inventorial, and that the only piece she lingers over, every year, the only one she holds a moment too long, is a thin old garnet ring worth perhaps 30 shillings, and then it goes back under the false bottom of the glove box and the diamonds go on top, and the season begins. 30 shillings under 4,000 pounds. Every house on this street has that ring somewhere. Remember it. It's the truest thing in the safe. The first carriages arrive at 10:10, and by 11 Park Lane outside this house is jammed solid for a quarter of a mile. You're on the door with William and 2 of the hired men, and the door is a machine and you are its moving parts. Carriage stops. You go down the red carpet under the awning. It's begun to drizzle, a fine June drizzle that beads on the awning canvas and drums there, soft, constant, like fingers. You open the carriage door, you drop the step with your foot, you offer your white-gloved forearm, rigid, a rail, not a hand, and a lady descends onto it. Satin, whalebone, a wall of scent, the dead-weight lean of a woman whose gown weighs 15 pounds and whose stays will not let her bend. You feel each one's whole weight for 1 second in your shoulder. 360 guests. You will feel that second 300 times tonight, and tomorrow your right shoulder will click when you raise it, and it will go on clicking for a week. Names are shouted up the stairs. The groom of the chambers, hired for the night, bawling each arrival into the roar, the Earl and Countess of. The music comes down to meet the names. Waltzes. A Hungarian band, very fashionable this year, and through the open ballroom doors the sound pours down the marble stairwell along with the heat, because that's the first thing nobody tells you about a great Victorian ball, the heat. 400 bodies, 600 candles, gas in the supper room, no ventilation worth the name because the ladies must not sit in draughts. By midnight, the ballroom is a furnace hung with roses. The flowers wilt visibly, hour by hour like time-lapse. Gentlemen's collars dissolve. Ladies are walked, white-faced, to the cooler landing by partners pretending nothing is wrong. In the cloakroom there are maids with hartshorn and needles and thread, a whole field hospital for split seams and swoons, and it is fully staffed and fully busy, and no guest will ever mention that it exists. Nothing happens. Whatever happens, nothing happens. Your post from 11 is the supper room, and the supper room is where you finally see them all at once. The whole apex of the empire eating. A marquess whose family came over with the conqueror, holding his plate of quail slightly wrong. The cabinet minister, laughing at the centre of 6 men who all want something from him. Girls in their first season, white dresses, terrified eyes above trained smiles, being walked past mothers with lists, and moving through them all, Mrs. Renwick, in grey satin, and the diamonds that came out of the Kimberley ground, working. You can see it now, you've learned to see it. Working the room like a stoker works a furnace. A word here, an introduction there, her face a lamp that never gutters. And you know, because the lady's maid knows, that she has eaten nothing since noon, and that her stays are laced for the gown, not for breathing. At 20 minutes to midnight there is a stir at the door like wind through a wheat field, every head turning the same way in a wave, and the Royal Highness comes in. He is stouter than the pictures. That's your whole first thought, the exact thought. Stout, and even having it feels like trespass. The band stops mid-bar and strikes up the anthem. 400 people bow and dip in one motion, a field of silk going down, and you go down with them, tray and all, and hold, and in the held silence you can hear the drizzle on the awning all the way from the front door, and one candle sputtering, and your own pulse. He stays 55 minutes. He eats 2 quails and praises the salmon. He speaks to Mrs. Renwick for 4 minutes by the supper-room clock, and you happen to be holding champagne 6 feet away, and so you are present, invisible, therefore present, at the exact moment this family's £2 million finishes its conversion into the thing it was always for, not comfort. They had comfort at £500,000. Recognition. The royal head inclines. Something is said about the roses. Mrs. Renwick's laugh is perfect, and it is done. The Renwicks are in. 17 years, 1 fortune, 10,000 roses, and 4 minutes. He leaves at midnight. The ball, its purpose achieved, blazes on out of pure momentum. And at 2:15 in the morning, in the basement, the lamp in the still-room passage sets fire to the house. Here is how it happens, because afterwards everyone will ask, and you will be the one who knows. The hired waiters have been running the passage all night. Someone's coat-tail or someone's tray catches the bracket lamp. Paraffin, the same oil that lives in the cracks of your hands, and it comes off its hook and bursts on the flagstones outside the linen store. And burning oil does what burning oil does. It spreads flat and fast, a bright liquid sheet, and it finds the skirt of the airing rack, and the rack is hung with dry linen, and dry linen goes up not like cloth, but like paper, one gasp, floor to ceiling. You are 20 feet away, coming down the stone stairs with a tray of dirty glasses, and you see the light change on the passage wall before you hear anything. The wall goes gold, then white gold, then moving, and then the sound arrives. A soft, enormous whump, like a mattress dropped from a height, and heat rolls up the passage and touches your face like an open oven, and above your head, through 9 inches of floor, 300 people are waltzing. Whatever happens, nothing happens. You will think about the next 4 minutes for the rest of your life, and what you will think is this. Nobody decided anything. The house decided. 3 years of drill closed over you like water. You set the tray on the stairs, you set it down, you don't drop it, and later this detail will strike you as either magnificent or insane. And you are shouting, but low, pitched down the passage and not up the stairs, fire in the still room passage, fire, buckets, and the basement, which never sleeps on a ball night, turns on its axis. Cook is there in 4 seconds with the great fire blanket from the kitchen wall. William comes through the scullery door with the first bucket, and Ada, 14 years old, £8 a year, the girl. Ada is nearer than anyone, and Ada does the thing that saves the house. The linen room door stands open, and the fire is leaning toward it, toward a room stacked to the ceiling with 200 pounds of dry cloth, a bomb of a room, and Ada crosses in front of the flames along the scorching flagstones and pulls that door shut. The iron handle has been drinking heat for a full minute. She takes it with her bare right hand, and she pulls, and the door bangs to, and she does not scream. She folds over her hand as goes down on her knees against the wall, silent, because Cook sleeps nearby and Cook wakes angry, because quiet is the deepest habit she owns, and even now, even burning, she's quiet. Buckets, sand from the scullery, the blanket beaten down, again, again. The heat on your face tightening the skin, your eyebrows crisping at the edges, smoke like a rope down your throat, the glass in the passage window cracking with a sound like a knuckle. And then it is out. 6 minutes beginning to end. A blackened stinking passage, a ruined rack, a scorched door that held 40 ball gowns worth of linen intact behind it, and upstairs, faint through the floor, the band has not stopped. The Hungarian waltz has covered everything, and not one guest, not one, ever will know. Mr. Fall comes down at the smell. He stands in the wrecked passage in his perfect black, and looks and understands the whole event in one sweep the way he reads a dinner table, and his eyes find Ada, grey-faced against the wall with her hand wrapped in her apron, and something crosses his 61-year-old face that you've never seen on it before, and will never see again. He kneels, Mr. Fall, on the floor, and unwraps the hand himself gently, and the palm is white and wet and wrong, and he says, "Fetch Dr. Mears from the supper room. Tell him a case of burns below stairs. Tell him quietly, even now." And you go, and you thread the ballroom in your smoke-smelling livery with your singed eyebrows and your face arranged in perfect blankness, past the waltzing earls, and you murmur into the doctor's ear, and he sets down his champagne and follows you through the baize door out of the performance and into the house, and that swinging door, that soft thump behind you, has never sounded louder. The last carriage leaves at 4. The dawn is already grey in the area steps, and the family goes up the marble stairs to bed knowing, this is the part, hold this part, knowing nothing. Not yet. They danced on a fire and never felt the warmth. Tomorrow Mr. Fall will report it, calm as a weather report, and Mr. Renwick will come down and look at the black passage and go very quiet and give £5 to Ada. 7 months' wages pressed on her awkwardly, the awkwardness of a man handling a debt no money fits. And Mrs. Renwick will ask the girl's name. 2 years in her house, and she will ask her name, Ada. Her name is Ada Sole. She is 14. Her hand will heel stiff in 2 fingers, and she will scour copper with it for 30 more years in this house and 2 others, and she will never once tell the story herself. You will tell it. In servants' halls for decades, until it grows smooth as a river stone, the night the girl shut the door. Food, too. I owe you the food properly, because nothing separates the 2 houses inside this one house more precisely than what goes into their mouths, and the kitchen is where the whole separation is manufactured, twice over every day by the same 8 hands. Cook, Mrs. Bantry to the tradesman, cook to God and everyone else, runs a kitchen that produces on an ordinary day 2 entirely different cuisines under one ceiling. Upstairs eats French, or what Park Lane means by French. Consommé clarified with egg white and patience, soles in cream, entrees with names, cook pronounces her own way and dares correction, sweetbreads, aspics, the pineapple, the ices. Downstairs eats English, the boiled beef, the sweet, the cabbage, the batter puddings, bread in white cliffs. And the marvel you never stop privately marvelling at is the timing, that at 12:14 servants sit down hot, and at 8 o'clock 8 diners sit down hot, and between those 2 summits the same range, the same woman, the same 14-year-old at the copper, and the range never goes out. March to March. A fire that has not died in the 6 years cook has ruled it, fed and raked and banked like a ship's boiler, and the kitchen in July stands at 90 degrees and more, and cook works in it 12 hours with her forearms bare and her temper legendary, and her wages £40, the highest of any woman in the house, and earned, every farthing, in sweat you could bottle. The waste is the part your mother would not believe, so I'll give it to you straight with what becomes of it, because Victorian London wasted nothing all the way down. From a 12-course dinner for 8, perhaps a third comes back down untouched, sculpted whole, and the law of the kitchen disposes of it in strict order of rank, like everything else in this civilization. First the upper servants' table takes its pick, then the hall, then the perquisites, and perquisites are wages by another name, old as service itself. The dripping is cook's, hers by right, sold weekly to a dealer at 4p the pound, and a great house's cook can add £10 a year to her wages in dripping alone. The used tea leaves are the housemaids, dried and sold on, because there are households in this city that buy their tea second-hand, brewed once in Mayfair and again in Somers Town. The candle ends are the footman's, yours, sold by the pound to the rag shop, and the empty bottles are Mr. Fall's, and the rabbit skins are the scullery's, and none of this is theft, and all of it is accounted ancient custom, the whole below-stairs economy running like a coral reef on the fall of crumbs from above. And last, at dusk, the step. The newspaper parcels, the old soldier on Tuesdays. Nothing falls out of this system until it has passed through every hand in it, and the final hand is holding it out through the area railings in the dark. You eat yourself better than you will ever eat again. You don't know that yet, but I do, so mark it. Beef most days, beer twice a day. Brewed allowance, a pint at dinner and a pint at supper, entered in the books. Cheese, bread without stint, cocoa at night in winter. The plan, the Lambeth plan, the bell on the door plan, will feed you adequately and freely and never once like this. And there will be an evening in 1897, in your own snug behind your own bar, eating your own bread and butter that nobody can forbid you, when you would swap it. For 1 hour, mind, 1 hour only, for boiled Thursday beef at a scrub table below a pavement on Park Lane, with the bells hanging quiet and Effie 2 benches down not looking at you on purpose. Freedom has a plainer table, You will pay it gladly, but you will know, as the ones who never served never know, exactly what the cage cost and exactly what it fed you, both columns, to the ounce. The morning after a ball, a great house is a battlefield after the treaty. You're allowed to sleep until 7, 1 extra hour, the house's idea of convalescence, and then the clearing begins, and the clearing takes 2 days. 600 glasses, washed by hand in the scullery. Ada one-handed and refusing to sit out drying while Effie washes. The chalk danced off the ballroom floor into a grey felt that gets into everything. 10,000 roses dead. You carry them down by the armful, and dead roses by the 100 weight have a smell nobody warns you about. The cold green sweetness gone over into something like tea leaves and old wine. Sweetish, brownish, the smell of money spent. And the flower girls come to the area door at 8, because they always come the morning after a ball. Women from the courts off Shepherd Market who buy the night's dead flowers for pennies, pick out whatever will stand up one more day, and sell it at dawn tomorrow outside the hospitals and the stations. The roses that bowed to a royal highness at midnight will be pinned 40 hours later to the coat of a clerk courting a shop girl on the Edgware Road, and neither of them will ever know, and there is the whole city for you, in one bucket of flowers. Everything trickles down, everything is resold, nothing is wasted except people. The silver is counted. It is always counted after a great night, piece by piece against the plate book, because hired men are hired men, and this time 1 teaspoon is gone. 1 out of 400 pieces, and Mr. Fall enters it in the book in his copper plate hand with the date and the word ball beside it, and says nothing further, and you understand that the teaspoon is, in his ledger of the world, a reasonable tax. And the season rolls on because the season stops for nothing. Within a week the ball has become currency. The papers that report such things report it. The royal 55 minutes are mentioned, and the invitations arriving on the hall salve change texture. Heavier cards, older names, the inner doors swinging open one by one. Mrs. Renwick's voice on the stairs has a new register in it, half a tone lower, the sound of a woman who has stopped auditioning. You hear these things. You hear everything. You are the walls. July burns out in a haze of heat and horse dust. The park thins. And at the end of the month, the house performs its great annual migration, because here is another thing about how millionaires really lived. They lived in shifts, geographically. London for the season, then Scotland for the grouse in August, then the country for the autumn, then perhaps the Riviera after Christmas, and the houses travel with them, not the buildings, the organisms. You go north in August as part of a baggage train that would embarrass a small army. The plate in its locked chests, the linen in hampers, the cellars best in straw, 14 servants, 1 dog, and a private railway saloon for the family while you ride second class with the luggage. And Park Lane is left behind under dust sheets, every chandelier bagged, every chair shrouded, the shutters barred, a house of white ghosts with 1 caretaker walking it twice a day, £2 million of stillness waiting in the dark for May. But August 1st, before the years turn anywhere, the migration itself, because you have never told anyone what Scotland actually was, and it deserves telling. The journey north takes a full day and most of a night. King's Cross at 8 in the morning, and the platform is a small war. The family's luggage alone fills a van. Mrs. Renwick travels with 19 trunks, and you know it's 19 because you numbered them yourself in chalk. And the lady's maid carries the jewel case personally, handcuffed to nothing but her own terror of losing it. The family settles into their private saloon with its armchairs and its luncheon hampers from Fortnum's. And you ride 5 carriages back on a wooden bench, with Effie asleep on William's shoulder, and the valet doing sums in a notebook, and the whole second-class carriage smelling of oranges, coal smoke, and 14 tired people. And the north rolls past the window hour after hour. York, Newcastle, Berwick, where the sea suddenly appears on the right-hand side, grey and enormous, and Ada, who has never seen the sea, stands up without meaning to, and puts her burned hand flat against the window glass, and nobody teases her, not even William. The shooting lodge is called Glen Farrack, and Mr. Renwick does not own it. He rents it 12 weeks for a sum that would buy the freehold of a street in Fulham, because that too is part of the performance. The right glen, the right river, the right neighbours renting the right glens on either side. The house is granite, freezing in August, lit by oil because the gas has never come this far, and the moors go up behind it like a brown sea, mile after mile of heather with the mist walking on it, and the silence at night after 3 years of Park Lane is so total that for the first week you cannot sleep in it. Your ears keep reaching for hooves and finding nothing, and the nothing has a pressure to it like deep water. Your work changes shape entirely. In Scotland, a footman becomes half a gamekeeper's mule. On shooting mornings, you're up at 5 to pack the luncheon panniers, cold grouse pie, bottled beer, cherry brandy and wicker-covered flasks. And then you walk out with the guns, always carrying, cartridge bags at £40, waterproofs, shooting sticks, the luncheon itself strapped to a pony you lead by the head. The gentlemen shoot driven grouse from butts sunk in the heather, and the birds come over fast and low with a sound like ripping cloth, and the guns go all morning doubled, each gentleman with a load of passing pieces and the smell of it, burnt powder, wet heather, bruised bog myrtle, pony sweat, is a smell you will be able to summon on your deathbed. Your boots fill with peat water in the first hour and stay full. Your shoulders wear the pannier straps raw, and at 1:30 you lay a white cloth on the heather, on the actual mountainside, and serve luncheon with the same silver and the same bows as Park Lane, mist rolling past the salt cellars, and the gentlemen sit on Mackintosh squares eating grouse pie shot the previous week, shooting more grouse between courses if a covey comes over, and you stand behind them on a Scottish mountain in livery breeches, hands crossed, invisible at 600 feet above the sea, and you think, nobody at home would believe a word of this. The bag one day in late August is 340 brace, 680 birds picked up by keepers and dogs, laid out in rows in the game larder like a harvest, and most of them go south by train, packed in ice to be sold. Even the sport feeds back into money somewhere, and Mr. Renwick that evening at dinner is happier than you have ever seen him in London. That's a thing about the rich you learn in Scotland. They come north to be let off the leash of their own performance. The collars soften, the hours loosen. Mr. Renwick walks the moor in ancient tweed with a dent in the hat, and one drizzling afternoon, waiting out a squall in the lee of a stone butt, just the two of you wet through. He passes you the cherry brandy flask, passes it to you, to your hand, and says, looking at the mist, "My father carried bricks, Kittle, hodfuls of bricks, up ladders in Bermondsey. Nobody here knows that," and takes the flask back and never mentions it again. And neither do you, and you understand that you've just been used as the safest room in his house, the place a man can put a true thing, because the walls don't talk upstairs. Below stairs, Scotland is the nearest thing to holiday your life contains. The lodge servants' hall has a fiddle in it. There are dances, real ones, servants' dances in the barn with the keepers and the village, and Mr. Fall permits them because even Mr. Fall's rules thaw 2 degrees north of Perth, and you dance with Effie to a reel you don't know, both of you laughing at your own feet, and William dances with the head keeper's daughter 3 times, which is noticed. Ada learns to guddle trout from the underkeeper, kneeling on the bank of the burn with her sleeves up, her scarred forearms in the ice-cold water, patient as a heron, and comes back one Sunday with a fish and a face you've never seen on her. 14 for once, just 14. And cook fries the trout for the servants' supper and announces the catch to the table, and Ada goes scarlet down at the foot by the door, and it is, you would swear it, the first public credit of her entire life. 12 weeks. Then the trunks again, the chalk numbers, the long train south, and London coming back around you at King's Cross like a lid. The noise, the yellow air, the hooves, and the dust sheets come off Park Lane 1 room at a time, and the bells wake on their springs, and the collar tightens, and by the 1st of November it is as if the more never happened, except that it did, and you keep it, the way you keep everything, in the place under the stillness of your face. There's one whole life inside this house I've only shown you sideways, and she deserves a day of her own, because the question you came in with was how millionaires really lived, and half the millionaires were women, and a rich woman's day in this London was a stranger machine than her husband's. So, one Wednesday of Mrs. Rennick's in the season, as the house sees it, which is to say completely, because the house sees everything, she wakes at 8:30 to a fire lit by a maid she didn't hear, and the first hour of her day is engineering. This is what the drawing rooms don't say, and the basement knows to the ounce. A fashionable woman in 1888 is built each morning by staff. The lady's maid, Mademoiselle Vernet, Sussex-born actually, plain Fanny Verney, but a French maid commands £10 a year more than an English one. So Fanny crossed the Channel without ever leaving Sussex, and half the French maids in Mayfair have done the same. Mademoiselle Vernet spends 50 minutes on the hair alone, brushing, padding, pinning, and then comes the armour, the corset. And you know about the corset the way the whole basement knows from the lacing holes moving, from Vernet's tight mouth on gown days, that Mrs. Renwick is laced to 22 inches for evening, and that at 44 years old 22 inches means she cannot pick up a dropped glove, cannot eat more than a bird's portion at her own 12-course dinners, and climbs her own marble staircase in small, careful flights like a woman managing a wound. Then the dress, a morning dress for indoors, which will be changed for a walking costume, which will be changed for the park, which will be changed for dinner. 4 full changes a day in the season, 5 with a ball, each one a 2-person operation of hooks and lacing. And when people ask what a lady's maid does all day, that is what she does. That and the mending and the pressing and the hair. 13 hours of it, for £25 a year, and the cast-off gowns, which she sells, because there is a whole market in worn Mayfair silk, and the dealers come to the area doors on Mondays. Then the morning's work, and it is work. The household books with Mrs. Prow. A house like this spends £6,000 a year below the salt, on wages and coal and wax and meat, and Mrs. Renwick audits it fortnightly, line by line, sharper than any clerk, because she was not born to this. She keeps saying to Mrs. Prow, and knows what things cost, which is the most feared sentence in the housekeeper's month. Then the correspondence. 15, 20 letters a morning in her sloped hand, acceptances, regrets, the endless diplomacy of the dinner table, who cannot sit by whom, which pair are lately not speaking, whose daughter must be placed next to whose son. It is politics conducted in cream-laid paper, and she is good at it, and nobody will ever call it work, and it is work. And then, that Wednesday, the expedition you drove on, shopping. But understand what shopping has just become in this city, because it is brand new and it is enormous. There are palaces of it now. Whiteley's in Bayswater, the universal provider. 2,000 staff under one roof, where a lady can buy an ostrich feather, a piano, and a honeymoon in the same building. And the drapers' cathedrals of Regent Street, plate glass windows tall as the carriage. And this is the revolution nobody noticed happening. A respectable woman can now spend a whole day in public, unescorted, and call it errands. The department store is the first indoor place in London a lady can walk freely that isn't a church or somebody's drawing room. There are tea rooms in them now, and ladies' cloakrooms, and that last item is bigger than it sounds. Ask any woman who ever cut a day short for the lack of one. You wait outside Marshall and Snellgrove with a carriage for 2 hours and 10 minutes, walking the horses when a constable moves you on, and she comes out followed by a procession of parcels. Nothing carried. Ladies carry nothing. The parcels will mostly be delivered anyway by van tomorrow, having spent, Verney reports that evening, £41. Your year and £9 over, in an afternoon, on gloves and silk and a hat. And here is the thing you genuinely cannot decide walking the horses, whether that afternoon was her freedom or her cage, because it is the only unsupervised sovereignty she has, the spending. The money is his, the house is his, the name is his, even the diamonds are in law his. A married woman's property has only just within your working lifetime become partly her own by Act of Parliament, and the shops are the one country where her writ runs alone. £41. Perhaps that is what liberty costs when it comes by the yard. At 5:30, the children's hour, which you know. At 7, the dressing, the 22 inches. At 8, dinner somewhere, hers or someone else's. And her real shift begins, the working of rooms, the lamp face that never gutters, and you have seen her come in from those evenings at 1 in the morning, seen it from the hall as you took the cloaks, the face holding perfectly until the exact moment the drawing-room door closes behind her, and then through the door left 1 inch ajar, the sound of a long breath let out, one, like a labourer setting down a load. Then Vernette unlaces her, 50 hooks and a bodkin, and brushes out the 50 minutes of morning hair, and Mrs. Rennick sleeps 6 hours in the only 60 minutes of her day, the last that nobody has scheduled. You want to know how millionaires really lived? The men were performed for, the women performed. 14 hours a day, laced to the bone, in 4 costumes to an audience that was scoring her. And the score decided her children's marriages and her husband's dinner tables and the family's whole slow siege of society. She had 11 servants and no minutes. He had £2 million and she had 41, once on a Wednesday, at Marshall and Snellgrove. Neither of them, in 3 years, has ever once been alone in a room. Think about that as you drift. You, in your attic, with your candle and your 60 square feet of sloped ceiling. You're the only person in this entire house who is ever truly by himself. It is the one luxury the basement has that the marble floors cannot buy, and you would not have believed at 16 that it was a luxury at all. November brings the fog, and the fog deserves its own chapter in how millionaires really lived, because the fog was the one thing on this street that money could not fix, a proper London particular. Coal smoke from a million grates pressed down under cold still air until the city drowns in its own breath. It comes yellow-brown, thick enough to taste. Sulphur, soot, something greasy underneath. And it gets indoors, even here, even through the Renwick's double sashes. It hazes the drawing room by afternoon so that the far wall softens, and it lays a black film on the sills that the housemaids wipe 3 times a day, and Mrs. Renwick's white gardenias come up from the florist twice as often, 'cause they yellow overnight in it. On the worst day that November, the fog is so dense that link boys are out at noon with torches. The same trade, the identical trade, that lit Londoners home 200 years ago, resurrected every fog by simple necessity. And carriages move at a walk with grooms leading the horses' heads, and you are sent out to Piccadilly with a letter, and get lost, actually lost, on streets you have walked 500 times, groping from railing to railing in a brown darkness full of coughing strangers, and a hand takes your sleeve, and it's a crossing sweeper, an old man you pass daily and have never once addressed, and he says, "Curzon Street's this way, sir." Sir, to a footman, the fog dissolving rank along with everything else, and leads you 40 yards by the arm like a blind man, and will not take your penny. The fog kills that week. You read it in the paper at servants' dinner. The death rate up by hundreds, bronchitis, the very old and the very young, and the cattle at the Smithfield show suffocating in their stalls. The rich die of it less, because the rich can leave, and some do, bolting to Brighton till it lifts. But their servants stay with the house is breathing it, and Mr. Fall's cough that winter acquires a new note, a deep tearing note, and you hear it at night through the attic partition, 1 floor of the house, coughing while the shut bedrooms of the other floor stand empty, their owners at the seaside, and if you want a single picture of the whole arrangement, that November will do. Christmas comes. The family spends it at a friend's place in Hampshire, so Park Lane's Christmas belongs for once to the basement. Cook roasts a goose for the servants' hall. Mr. Fall, by ancient licence, unlocks 2 bottles of the second best port and proposes the Queen, and then, gruffly, absent friends, and everyone thinks of their own. Your mother in Norfolk with the £12 that keeps her cottage, Effie's brother at sea, Ada's family in Poplar, 7 of them in 2 rooms, to whom she has sent, you happen to know, every shilling of Mr. Renwick's £5 note. On Boxing Day come the Christmas boxes, the tips of the year, tradesmen's boys knocking at the area door all morning, and in the evening the servants exchange their own presents, small things, 6-penny things, and Effie gives you a pair of knitted wristlets against the winter silver-cleaning grey wool slightly uneven, and you wear them every cold morning for the next 6 years, and when they finally wear through you will be surprised, folding them away, how much a man can mind about 6pence of wool. And 1 more hour belongs in this night, the strangest hour the house owns, Sunday morning, church parade, the 1 hour a week when both nations of this house walk out under the same sky at the same time, separately. The family goes to St. George's, Hanover Square, at 11 by carriage, a journey of 9 minutes that could be walked in 12, because the carriage is part of the observance. They have a rented pew, £4 a year, with the name on a brass card, cushioned, halfway down the nave where the sight lines are best in both directions, for seeing the fashion and being seen keeping the faith, and the 11 o'clock at St. George's in the season is, in plain fact, another room of society. The same faces as Thursday's ball, the same diamonds dimmed 1 respectful stop, the vergers moving down the aisle like head waiters, and the sermon, which you've heard reported at Sunday lunch 3 years running, runs 18 minutes, and lands with great regularity on the dignity of one's station and the duties of one's stewardship, and is received by 200 people worth perhaps £40 million with an expression of mild endorsement, as of shareholders hearing a satisfactory report. The servants go to the 8 o'clock, early service before the family wakes in rotation, half the hall one week, half the next, because the house cannot ever be empty and breakfast cannot ever be late, God himself conceding precedence to the bells on the board. You walk, a crocodile of you in Sunday black down South Audley Street in the grey early light. Cook in a bonnet with jet beads that only exists on Sundays. Ada scrubbed pink. Mr. Fall ahead like a flagship. To the same church, the identical church, and sit at the back in the free pews and hear the shorter service said not sung, and put your penny in the plate that will hold sovereigns by noon. Same God, same building, different door, different hour. You have long stopped expecting the sermon to notice the arrangement. But there is a thing about the 8 o'clock that the 11 o'clock will never have, and you defend it. The light. At 8 on a June morning, the sun comes through the east window straight down the empty nave, and the church is cool and plain and smells of stone and last week's lilies, and there is no one to perform for. Nobody at the 8 o'clock is watching anybody. And for about 40 minutes, once a week, the entire apparatus lets go of you, and you're not 6 feet of livery. You're a Norfolk man in a pew with the light on him, and whatever that hour is worth, the family, in their cushioned £4 pew at 11, watching each other, will never once get it. Then home, and the great Sunday inversion. Cold luncheon upstairs, because cook's half-day is sacred, and the afternoon slows, and Sunday evening in the servants' hall is the week's one soft hour. Mending, letters home, William reading out the racing results he isn't supposed to have. Mr. Fall in his shirt sleeves, actually his shirt sleeves, doing his accounts at the end of the table with a glass of the beer, and the bells on the board silent, all 38 of them, hanging dead still on their springs like a choir dismissed. That silence has a texture. You will miss it one day, from a public house in Lambeth full of noise that belongs to you. You will miss, of all things, the sight of 38 silent bells, and you will be entirely unable to explain this to your wife, who was a housemaid, and who will look at you across your own bar and say, "The board, Sundays," and go back to her pouring, because she will know exactly, and that is why you married her. And the new year brings the thing you never speak of, the winter of the letters, because how millionaires really lived includes how they very nearly stopped being millionaires, and you were the only person in England, besides 2 men in the city, who watched it happen. It starts as texture, the way everything upstairs starts. In January, the letters with the city seals begin arriving twice a day instead of once. The valet reports that Mr. Rennick has stopped taking wine at luncheon. The 4 o'clock in the morning sittings by the bedroom window become 3 nights a week, then 5. And one evening in February, serving coffee in the library, you see the newspaper folded on his desk to the money page, and a name circled in pencil, circled so hard the pencil has gone through the paper, an Argentine name, a railway name, one of his names. Here is what is happening, assembled the way the servants' hall assembles everything. From fragments over weeks, Argentina is wobbling. The great boom that built half the railways on the Pampas, the boom Mr. Rennick rode up, is swaying on its foundations of borrowed money, and the mighty house of bearing, the bank that floated those very loans, the bank so grand that even you know its name, is exposed to its neck. Nothing has fallen yet. But money smells weather before weather comes, and Mr. Renwick's money is smelling it, and a man who is owed fortunes by a country that may stop paying is a man who sits by windows at 4 a.m. You watch him shrink that winter, not his body, his radius. He gives up the second carriage quietly, the horses sold, the undergroom let go with a month's wages and a character. Mrs. Renwick's Tuesday dinners drop from 12 courses to 9, which sounds like nothing and is, on this street, a semaphore flag visible for miles. And the street reads it. You know the street reads it because footmen talk to footmen, and at the area railings the man from number 34 asks you, casual as whether it's true the Renwicks are giving up the Scottish shooting this year, and you look at him with your trained face and say, "You're sure you couldn't say," and carry the question indoors like a splinter. The worst night is a Thursday in March. He rings the library bell at 1:30 in the morning, bell 19, dancing alone on the dark board, and you go up, and he is standing at the cold fireplace in his dressing gown with a single candle and perhaps 30 letters laid out on the carpet in rows, arranged like a general's map. And he says, brandy, kittle, and you might make up the fire, and you kneel at the grate in the small hours doing housemaid's work with kindling and coal, while the master of £2,000,000 stands behind you, in the candlelight reading letters, and neither of you speaks, and the fire catches, and you rise to go, and he says, to the letters, not to you. Do you know what the whole trick of it is? Never let them see you counting. A pause, the candle ticking. Any of them, ever. And you say, very good, sir, because that is the entire vocabulary you are issued for such moments. And you go down the dark stairs understanding that you have just heard a rich man state the rule of his life, and that it is, word for word, the rule of yours. Never let them see you counting. Upstairs and downstairs are running the same performance. The only difference is the size of the sums. He survives it. You should know that, for the sleep's sake. The crisis breaks in the autumn of 1890. Bearings totters. The Bank of England throws a net under it. The city holds its breath for a fortnight and does not fall. And Mr. Renwick comes through singed but standing, lighter by sums you will never know, heavier by a stoop that never afterwards quite leaves his shoulders. The second carriage returns the following spring. The dinners go back to 12 courses. The street which watched him shrink watches him refill and says nothing, because the street has seen it before. Fortunes on Park Lane breathe in and out like sleepers, and the houses stand still around them and keep the secret, and the servants keep the houses. There is one more room in this house I have to show you before we sleep, because you cannot understand how these people lived until you have stood in it. The nursery. It is on the 3rd floor, behind its own baize door, and it is a separate country. 2 rooms, a day nursery and a night nursery, a fireguard like a fortress, and in it live the 2 youngest Renwick children, Miss Dorothea 6 and Master John 4, under the absolute government of Nurse, a Scotswoman of 50 who ranks in the strange map of the house, alongside the upper servants and above the laws of physics. And here is the arrangement, and I want you to hear it plainly. Because it was ordinary, it was universal on this street. It was how every millionaire's child in Victorian London was raised. The children see their parents for 1 hour a day. The children's hour, 5:30, after nursery tea. They are washed, brushed, dressed in clean pinafores, and brought down by nurse to the drawing-room, where Mrs. Renwick receives them like small formal visitors. And that is not spite, that is not coldness of heart, that is simply the system, the same system that runs everything else in this house. Mothering, like cooking, like carrying coal, is skilled labour to be delegated to staff. So it is nurse who hears the prayers and treats the fevers. It is the nursery maid who cuts the bread and butter. And it is you, oddly, you and the basement, whom the children actually know, because children slip their borders. Master John escapes down the back stairs at every opportunity and has to be retrieved from the kitchen, where cook, iron cook, terrible cook, feeds him raisins and lets him stand on a chair to watch her ice a cake. And Miss Dorothea has decided with a 6-year-old's total certainty that you are her particular property, and lies in wait for you on the landing to make you guess which hand the marble is in. And you always guess wrong, gravely, magnificently wrong. And Mr. Fall sees this happen once, this footman in full livery losing at marbles to a child on the half landing, and walks past with a face of stone, and says only at the foot of the stairs without turning, "The left hand." She always uses the left. Even Mr. Fall. The whole basement raising in stolen minutes, the children of the people it serves, loving them off the books, unpaid, unrecorded. And those children will grow up and enter society and forget the kitchen absolutely, except that they won't. Not entirely. 40 years from now, a grown Dorothea will smell raisins and cold marble and feel, for one unaccountable second, entirely safe, and never once be able to say why. That is the last ledger of this house, the one nobody keeps. The account of things done for these people that no wage covered, Ada's hand, cook's raisins, the wristlets, the fire made up at 2 a.m. It is all off the books, all of it, and it is the only part of the whole gilded machine you sometimes think, lying up here under the roof, that was ever real. And there is the door itself, the area door, your door. And what came to it? Because the last thing you need to know about this street is who knocked at its basements and what the answer was. The area door is the membrane between the two Londons, and all day long the other city presses against it. The tradesmen's boys first, from 6 a.m, the milk in churns, ladled at the step into the kitchen cans, the fish from Grimsby packed in seaweed, and the fish boy whistles the same 4 notes every day of his life. The iceman staggering under his glittering slab with sacking on his shoulder, and in July the ice sweats down his back, and he stands a moment in the cool of the passage like a man at a shrine before he goes back up into the heat. Then the cellars, watercress women at dawn, cat's meat man with his skewers of horseflesh, and every cat in the mews processing behind him like clergy, the knife grinder with his treadle wheel, Sparks hopping on the flags, the old clothes men, the French onion boys off the Brittany boats with their strings and their berets, and cook beats them all down by a penny on principle, and then feeds them soup on the same principle, and both principles are iron. And then, at dusk, the others, the ones with nothing to sell. They come at dusk because dusk is when cook softens and the police change beats, and every basement on this street knows its own regulars. Yours are 3. An old soldier with 1 arm, Crimea, he says. A Mr. Fall, who can date a man's service by his boots, says, India. But a war is a war, and an arm is an arm. Who comes on Tuesdays and gets the meat left from servants' dinner, folded in newspaper, and stands at the bottom of the steps to eat it, out of the wind, and cook always finds a reason to need the steps swept while he does, so that he isn't eating alone. A woman with 2 children who comes irregularly, whenever things upstream of her have gone wrong again, and never asks for anything, just stands, and the children's boots are the thing you can't look at and can't not. And a man your own age, your own height, that's the one that gets under the livery, A big Norfolk-sounding man who had your same idea 3 years after you had it and found the doors shut, because for every footman's place in London, there are 50 tall boys off the land, and the ones who don't find a basement to live in end up standing outside one at dusk. He gets bread and dripping and whatever coppers the hall can spare, and he thanks you. You personally thanks you. And every time it happens, you go back up the passage with your ears hot, because the difference between his side of that door and yours was a vicar's letter and 6 weeks of luck, and you know it and he knows it, and you both pretend the door is thicker than it is. Upstairs, understand, they give. That's the paradox you turn over on the back stairs. Mr. Renwick's name is on hospital subscription lists at 100 guineas. Mrs. Renwick sits on the committee of a society for something or other with a duchess in the chair. There is a charity ball every February and the tickets are 2 guineas, and it is a very great crush. This street pours thousands a year downhill into charity. Organised, printed, audited charity. Charity at committee distance. And would be honestly bewildered by the suggestion that it doesn't care. And meanwhile, the actual seam where rich London touches poor London, skin to skin, hand to hand, is the area step at dusk. And it is staffed entirely by servants, giving away scraps that are technically not theirs, in violation of the rule book, with the connivance of a butler who enters mysteriously high bread orders in the accounts, and dares nobody to ask. The family gives money and never sees a face. The basement gives dinners and knows every name. Both of them call it the same word. You've stopped trying to work out which one God prefers. You just carry the newspaper parcels down the steps Tuesdays and let the theology settle itself. There was one more knock, that spring, and it wasn't at the area door, and I'll tell it because it finished something in you. Mr. Gerald's debts came home, not by post, in person, at 11 at night. 2 men at the front door, quiet-suited, soft-voiced, the kind of men whose politeness is the frightening part, holding paper with the son's signature on it for £700. And you were on the door, and the family were at the opera, and the men were content to wait, they said, smiling in the hall, admiring the pictures. And it was Mr. Fall who came up, assessed them in one glance the way he reads a table, and did the thing you'll measure all composure against forever. Had you bring them sherry on a salver, to 2 moneylenders, collectors in the hall, and he stood conversing with them about the weather in his beautiful dead-level voice for 50 minutes, until the carriage came, and met Mr. Renwick at the door, and said 6 words into his ear, and steered the whole detonation. And it was a detonation. You heard it through 2 closed doors, the only time in 3 years the master's voice is raised. Steered it into the library, out of the hall, away from the servants who officially do not exist and unofficially heard every syllable. £700, paid by Thursday. Mr. Gerald shipped to a ranch in Wyoming by June. That is what this street does with its broken sons. It posts them to the horizon. Wyoming, Ceylon, Queensland. The Empire is a drawer for putting difficult young men in. And the whole affair closed over like water. And at dinner a week later, Mrs. Renwick told a countess that Gerald had gone out to America for the riding, and the countess said how splendid, and both women understood each other perfectly, and you refilled the glasses. Nothing happens, whatever happens. You could carve it over the door of this whole street. One more thread, and it belongs to spring, and it is the closest your story comes to having a heart of its own, so I will give it to you quietly the way it happened. Her name is Effie Marsh, 3rd housemaid, and you have been not courting her for 1.5 years. Not courting is the only kind of courting the rules of this house allow. No followers, remember, on any pretence whatsoever, and the rule applies with double force inside the walls. A footman and a housemaid discovered walking out together can both be dismissed, without a character, which in this trade is a sentence of exile, because no character means no place, and no place means the street. So what you have instead is a courtship built entirely out of the gaps in a working day, and you have become, both of you, engineers of gaps. You know that her corridor and yours cross at the linen landing at 6:20. You know that on Wednesdays she carries the mending down at 9, and the stairs are empty. You have spoken to Effie Marsh in 18 months, for perhaps 6 accumulated hours, 90 seconds at a time, and you can replay every one of them. A courtship conducted at whisper pitch, in stairwells, in the smell of soap and starch, timed against the bells. There are men who court in gardens, in theatres, in daylight, and you honestly wonder what they do with all that room. On the June Sunday nearest her birthday you manage the impossible, matching afternoons off. You leave the house separately 10 minutes apart by rule of your own devising, and meet at the Achilles statue like strangers happening to coincide, and walk in the park. Not Rotten Row, not the parade, but the plain grass north of the Serpentine where the clerks and the shopgirls and the servants of London walk on Sundays. Thousands of you, the below-stairs nation above ground for one afternoon, blinking in the light. She wears her own dress, not print, not black, a blue cotton with a sprig in it, and it stops you for a second on the path, because you have never once seen her in clothes that belong to her, and she catches you stopped and knows exactly why, and looks away pleased. You hire 2 chairs at a penny each. You buy a bag of cherries. You sit by the water for 2 hours doing absolutely nothing, which is the most luxurious thing either of you can conceive of, and she tells you about Suffolk and the sister in Ipswich and the plan. Every servant girl in London has the plan. The savings book, the little shop some day, a stationer's she thinks, somewhere with a bell on the door that rings for her. And you tell her about Norfolk and the brother, and you do not tell her that you have a savings book too, and that for about a year now the sums in it have stopped being abstract and started having a shape, and that the shape is roughly the size of a public house, or a lodging house, or a stationer's with a bell on the door. You walk back separately 10 minutes apart. At the area steps she goes down first and pauses 1 second at the door and doesn't look back and goes in. And you stand on the pavement of the richest street in the world with cherry stones in your pocket, over the basement where she's already tying her apron, under the windows of people worth £2 million, and you would not at this particular moment trade with a single one of them. It will take 4 more years. You should know that too, since we're being honest tonight. 4 years of stairwells and Sundays, of the savings books creeping upward £8 a year and 6, of one terrifying week when Mrs. Prow almost catches the whole thing, and Effie talks her way out of it with a coolness you didn't know she had. And then in 1892, William writes from Lambeth that the house, 2 doors from his public house, is to let, a small house with a shop front, and the arithmetic finally barely closes, and you will go together to Mr. Fall first, before anyone, because some debts are paid in precedence. And give your notice, and he will listen with his hands folded, and his ruined feet square on the floor, and be silent a long moment, and then say the longest sentence he has ever addressed to you. I have buried more of my life in other men's houses than I care to count, Kittle, and I will tell you the only thing I know. Leave while your legs are your own, and he will shake your hand, which has never happened, and enter your leaving date in the book in copper plate, and under occasion of departure he will write. You will see it years later when the book passes at his death to the man who keeps such things. Not the usual word, not resigned, but one word in his smallest, most careful hand, promoted. So when I tell you how millionaires really lived in Victorian London, understand that this is the true answer, the whole answer, the answer under the marble. They lived on top of all this. On top of Ada's hands and Effie's Wednesdays and Mr. Fall's feet and your shoulders, on top of a basement full of savings books and stolen Sundays and plans with bells on the door, on top of an entire submerged nation that carried them, fed them, warmed them, saved them from fire, raised their children on smuggled raisins, and dreamed every single night directly beneath their beds of doors of its own. And the years turn that way. That is the shape of them. I could tell you the rest of your life, Thomas, and it would not take long, because a life in service has the plot of a staircase. Second footman, then first when William leaves. William goes at 26, marries a cook, takes a public house in Lambeth, which is the classic footman's exit. The livery traded for a landlord's apron, and he will stand behind his own bar with his silver-stained thumb on his own pumps and be nobody's furniture ever again. You take his place and his extra £8 a year. Then in time, if your legs last and your face keeps its stillness, butler somewhere, maybe here. When Mr. Fall's feet finally finish the argument his face never joined. Mr. Fall retires in 1896, and the family, this is true to form, all of it, the family gives him a silver salver with an inscription and a pension of £50 a year, and he takes a cottage in Kent and dies within 18 months, because that is what happens to men whose entire nervous system was a bellboard. You take away the bells and the body, hearing nothing, stops listening altogether. Or perhaps you leave. Men do. There are countries, you hear about them at the area railings, Canada, Australia, where they say a man's height is his own property. Perhaps, but that's ahead, and this is a story for sleep. So let me bring you back to where a night should end. It is late September now, the family still away, the house half shuttered, and you're doing the last thing you do every night that you're in charge of the ground floor. The rounds, lamps out, one by one, working from the drawing room back toward the stairs, and each lamp dies with the same small sequence. The key turned, the flame shrinking to a blue bead, a whiff of paraffin, and darkness taking one more room. The shutters are barred. The plate closet is locked, and the key is on your ring now, which would have amazed you at 16. The great house settles around you in the dark, and a settling house talks, the staircloth breathing, a shutter ticking as the day's heat leaves it, water knocking once far off in a pipe, the long wooden sigh of floors that held 400 dancers and hold, tonight only you. You take your candle up the back stairs, 72 of them, your legs no longer count, past the family floors silent behind their bays, up into the attics, where the ceiling slopes and the window is a small cold square of London sky, orange-grey, starless, lit from below by 100,000 gas lamps, the only sky you've had for 3 years, and honestly, you've grown fond of it too. Your room, your bed. You set the candle down and sit, and the day comes off you the way it always does, in order, the shoes first, and your feet throb their gratitude, the collar stud, the coat on its hook, brushed with 3 strokes, because even dead tired, the hands do their drill. You lie down, the mattress knows you. Above the washstand there's a small mirror, and in the candlelight you catch yourself for a second. Powder gone, face plain, a Norfolk face after all this time. And then you look away because that man will keep till morning. Listen. This is the part of the night when the two houses trade places. The house of marble is asleep, or empty, or shuttered. It has no pulse of its own and never did. And the other house, the one made of hands, the one that lit it and carried it and fed it and once in June saved it from burning, that house is asleep too now, in its attics and its basement corners, Ada with her stiff hand curled under her chin, Effie with the police news under her pillow, the whole hidden nation of this city lying still at last under the roofs of houses that will never know their names. One servant in every 6 working souls. Say it again slowly. 1 in 6. The Empire's real foundation was never laid in stone. It was laid in beds like this one, briefly between midnight and 5. Your candle is guttering. Let it. Your shoulders ache, but it is the good ache now, the horizontal ache, the ache that means the weight is finally down. Your hands smell faintly of lamp oil and blacking, and still, somewhere underneath, of roses. Your thumb finds its callus, the way a tongue finds a tooth. You're warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have a roof that never leaks, a wage half sent to Norfolk, and a name, Thomas Kittle, that nobody upstairs knows, and that is tonight, in this bed, entirely and only yours. That's more than the street outside can say. That's enough. Tomorrow there will be shutters to open and lamps to fill. Tomorrow there will be silver, and the thumb will do its work. Tomorrow the bells will wake one by one on their coiled springs. But that's tomorrow. Right now there is only the settling house, and the small square of orange sky, and the long, slow loosening of a body that has stood since 6. The same as yesterday, the same as tomorrow, the same as all the days of service stretching out ahead, up the staircase of the years. Centuries will pass. The house you know will change beyond recognition. The bells will be ripped from the walls, the wires left dead in the plaster like old veins. The basements will become kitchens for families who cook their own suppers and think nothing of it. The attics will become flats with your window in them, and someone will stand at that small cold square of sky, holding a cup knowing nothing of you. The livery will go into museums, the powder, the calves, the salver, the baize doors. All of it will become curiosity, then costume, then footnote. But people will still work all day for other people's comfort and lie down aching at the end of it. Still send money home, still stand invisible in rooms full of wealth, holding things. Still shut the door on the fire with their bare hands and never tell the story. Some things don't change. The tired body doesn't change. The need, at the end of the long day, to set the weight down at last. That doesn't change either. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took Thomas Kittle in his attic on Park Lane, 140 years ago, with the candle drowning in its own wax and the great dark house breathing below him. Let the bells hang silent. Let the silver sleep in its locked dark. Let your shoulders drop and your hands uncurl and your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. You've earned this rest. You've been holding things all day too. Set them down, take it, and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.